Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is exciting. We don't have spillover rooms. We have a beautiful new hall to have the omnibus lectures in. And this, of course, is the first event that's ever been held in the beautiful Our Performance Hall. On October the 4th, we will have the grand opening of the John and Ruth Reinhardt Music Center. And at that time, we will really open up the hall, and we will thank, of course, all of the donors. But please enjoy this now. I won't go through that sort of an opening speech, but I do want to thank, once again, the English Bonner Mitchell Foundation for supporting the Omnibus Lecture Series all these years, 12 years, and I want everyone to know how grateful we are that we're able to have this kind of a series that brings Fort Wayne into IPFW and lets IPFW expose itself to Fort Wayne. We're delighted to have all of you here tonight. We have two media sponsors that I want to acknowledge. First, Wayne TV, News Channel 15, and the Northeast Indiana Public Radio. Both of those have been very good about sponsoring us, and will continue to sponsor all of the Omnibus Lecture Series this year. And in addition, tonight, we have two other sponsors that I want to acknowledge. First, the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, represented tonight by Lanny Conley, its president. Lanny, would you stand up? And also the Fort Wayne Museum of Art, represented by Charles Shepard, whom you will meet in just a minute because he will do the introduction of Cheech Marin. But before we bring Charles up to introduce Cheech, I want you to know that I spent part of the day with him. This is a real gentleman, an incredible man. I had a delightful couple of hours with him, and I can tell you that he loves Fort Wayne and looks forward to coming back already. So, Charles, if you would do the introductions.
It is indeed an honor and a delight to be on the opening night in this gorgeous facility. Thank all of you for sharing this with us, and thank all of you for coming out to hear Cheech Marin, not only because he's going to be absolutely wonderful, but Cheech Marin because he's going to talk to you about his art collection, which is the finest in the world, and we'll get into that in a moment after I run through some basic facts that you probably actually already know. In fact, it's impossible to think of too many original things to put out for you that you don't know about our guest tonight. You know, of course, that he achieved national and international recognition at first as part of the duo Cheech and Chong, the hilariously brilliant team that brought a continual stream of critically acclaimed and box office steady movies over a 15-year span. After Cheech and Chong, Mr. Marin starred in a number of films as a solo actor, three of my favorites being Born in East L.A., Tin Cup, and Once Upon a Time in Mexico. He also co-starred in a long list of very successful movies. Here's just a sample: Spy Kids 3 with Antonio Banderas, Once Upon a Time in Mexico with Johnny Depp, Tin Cup with Kevin Costner, From Dusk Till Dawn with George Clooney, Quentin Tarantino, and the list goes on steadily. Building on his movie success, he branched out into television and had great success when he co-starred with Don Johnson in the popular police show Nass Bridges. In 1999, he received the National Council of La Raza Crafts Food Community Service Award for his work on behalf of the Latino community. In 2000, Mr. Marin was the recipient of the Creative Achievement Award from the Imogen Foundation. In recent years, he's been very active playing supporting roles in films, performing voiceovers for animated features and other things of that type. In fact, I was saying to someone earlier this evening, it's interesting, in my one household, my oldest girl watched Up in Smoke. My boy thinks he's a sharp cop, the handsome guy in San Francisco. And my little girl says, oh, that's Banzai you're going to see tonight. And he's done all these things. Now, but what we're really going to focus in on tonight is something extraordinary, because in this last few years, beyond his acting career, directing career, writing career, he's reached out to find a whole new audience through his incredible Chicano art collection, the largest in the world and the finest in quality. His competitor, Joe Diaz, even says that. He's sharing that art with the public through two big national exhibits. The first, Chicano Visions, American Painters on the Verge. This is in the midst of a blockbuster tour, major art museums that will run through 2008. The second, the Chicano Collection, which features digital reproductions of all the paintings in his collection, and that's just begun a tour in Los Angeles. Now, it is so important not only to learn more about his collection, but I want to say on his behalf that it takes a very special person to focus on a group of people that really need to come to our attention. There are so many thousand artists out there. We only hear a few in all the magazines and books. He has found the best Chicano artists. He's gathered them together. That means they're going to have continued support from a larger public. We are going to have our horizons raised by this, and he will enlighten us as to how he's done this all tonight. So without further ado, I would like to now bring out Mr. Cheech Marin.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for... Can you hear me? No? Well, that messes that up right away. Can you hear me now? Aha, technology when it works. Thank you very much for inviting me to university. I can say this word, university, and to be the inaugural lecturer in your beautiful hall. Listen, this is a beautiful hall, you guys. Wow. Very nice. Last time I was in Fort Wayne was in the Stone Age. Or Stoner Age, I think it was. It was in the early 70s. We played the Empire Theater here downtown. And I remember Fort Wayne particularly because I was wandering around in the basement before the show, and the manager of the theater was showing me around, and I looked down the basement, and there was these two Art Deco candy machines that he had down there. And they're beautiful. They were made out of wood and plastic and mirrors. And I go, wow. And I was collecting that kind of art at the same time. And I said, wow, these are really nice. You want to sell them? And he goes, I don't know how much you give me for them. I said, well, I'll give you $50 for both of them. And he goes, okay, but you have to take them out yourself. Fort Wayne, rockin'. I love that, man, Midwest, you know. Well, thank you very much for coming tonight. We have a nice program for you with a lot of great art. And first I want to set some terms about what we're talking about. And the first one, I guess, is what the hell is a Chicano anyways? Because 99% of the country does not know what a Chicano is, much less what their art looks like. A Chicano, the original derivation of the term was an insult from Mexicans to other Mexicans living in this country, the concept being that the Mexicanos living in this country were no longer truly Mexicanos because they had left their country. They were something less. They were something smaller. They were Chicos. They were Chicanos, little satellite Mexicans living in the United States. To the rest of the country, they were still Mexicans. To the general populace, so there were people caught in between. They weren't Mexican and they weren't really Americans, but they were both at the same time, and they forged a new identity out of that. I am, in fact, a third-generation Chicano. My grandparents were all born in Mexico. My mother and father were born in Los Angeles, as was I, and my children were all born in L.A. So after that insult, depending on where you were in relation to the Mexican border, the term became more or less of an insult. The closer to the border, the more insulting it was. But as you got over to L.A., where I was from, they would just that's how I identified myself, because it was the only term that made sense. I wasn't a Mexican because I'd never even been to Mexico. I couldn't speak Spanish, and I knew I wasn't kind of what everybody thought I was American, and I wasn't Mexican American. I didn't like that. I didn't even like Hispanic and everything. But when I heard the first time I heard Chicano, it was my Uncle Rudy who was fixing a car, and the guy wanted $200 to fix it. And he said, just give me a piece of tinfoil and a pair of wire steps. I'll fix it. I'm a Chicano mechanic. And I go, yeah, I want to be Chicano mechanic too. As a matter of fact, I just want to be Chicano. That sounds good, man. He saves money. And so from that day forward, I was a Chicano. In the late 60s, the Chicano Civil Rights Movement took up that name as a badge of honor and put that out front, and they were proud to be Chicanos. And so the debate raged over the term. So when I started to put a show on tour this last 5 years, the hardest battle I had was using the word Chicano, because many people didn't like it. Some people were proprietary over it, and they wanted to define the term and who was Chicano, who wasn't. And as a matter of fact, the woman who was the head of the Hispanic Scholarship Fund, my good friend Cesar Martinez Tucker, who is now Undersecretary of Education in this current administration, just didn't want to be Chicano. She wanted to be Mexican American. And I said, Sarah, you're just one joint away from being a Chicano, so just... just relax into it, So my history is that when I was a young kid, I couldn't do art. I couldn't draw. I had no facility at it whatsoever. And so, but I loved it. Growing up Catholic, you're exposed to liturgical art, which was art for I don't know how many hundred years. But I loved it, so I started learning about it. I went to the library when I was very young, about 11, 12 years old, and started taking out the art books, and going, oh, wow, that's Miro, that's Kandinsky, that's Gauguin, that's Picasso, because I wanted to be sophisticated. I wanted to be able to walk into a cocktail party sometime in New York and go, oh, that's a very nice Miro, and that's a nice Renoir, like that was going to happen, But eventually it did happen. So when I got into the position of actually being able to afford art, vis-a-vis Cheech and Chong, I discovered these Chicano painters. And what I discovered is not only were they making images that resonated with my experience and my culture and things that I could identify, but these were world-class painters. These guys could really put it on. It was like discovering a great group of musicians that could really play. It didn't really matter what type of music they were playing. They could really execute it well. And there's something about the Chicano DNA that is handcrafted art. They never gave up the brush. They were always hands-on, hair on a stick, on a canvas kind of painters, and they still are wonderful draftsmen. And so what I was discovering when I was making a picture in New York around the mid-'80s, and I was hanging out with all these go-go 80 artists, Julian Schnabel and Keith Haring, and hey, was here for Julian. Turned out to be a good director. And David Sally and all those guys around in New York, and they were good, but I thought these Chicanos were better painters, and they weren't getting any play. They were struggling to have a gallery. They were showing in coffee shops, if they could even show there. And these other guys were having shows in Kassel and Basel and had homes in the Hamptons. And I said, well, there's an inequity here. And I'm going to do what I can when I get back to see what I can do to use my celebrity to bring these painters to the fore, because it's very easy for generations, or in this case 4 generations of painters, to go by their whole lives without being noticed and not ever get noticed till 100 years later. So I thought that that was not fair, and also the world was being deprived of great art. So I started collecting this art. And as I started collecting it, the first thing that I noticed was there's some similarities between these between these paintings. It's not that they painted the same subject, but they were talking about the same thing. And what I came to realize, that the thing that they were talking about was the experience of being Chicano. from a myriad of different viewpoints, whether it was historical or sociological or religious or gender-based or inner city or humorous or even abstract. And when you put all these pieces of the pie together, you got this 360 of the experience of what it was like to be Chicano in this country. And Chicano has now come to mean that immigrant experience, the mesoland between changing from the root of your cultural experience and incorporating American pop ideology and spitting out something new, something different, something that's influenced by both, but it is of its own art. And so I started collecting these Chicano painters, and the more I collected, the more I realized that this was actually a school of art, and I started proposing this idea that was Chicano School of Art, and the establishment, the art establishment, oh, well, we don't talk about schools anymore, that's very old hat, or, well, you say what, you call it what you want, but a school for me is a place where people come together to discuss knowledge and have a bunch of different viewpoints, and they can argue and agree and disagree. And so in that case, I thought this school is maybe not a school, maybe it's a university, because Chicanos love to argue. And so I started putting this on the road, and so I came up with this idea. I had a huge collection, and I wanted to share it with people. I wanted to have them see it, because you cannot love or hate Chicano art unless you see it. And so it's really easy to have the idea. Getting it actually on trucks and to different cities is a whole different matter, because it takes money. And in this country, the arts funding is the first funding taken away and the last to come back, as we all know. But also at the back of my mind was the idea that the only thing we really leave behind as a culture is our art. You go to see the pyramids, you go to see the Eiffel Tower, you go to see the Louvre. You don't go to see a museum of business deals or wonderful contracts. The only thing we leave behind us is our art, to say who we are, what we believed in, and where we've been and where we are going. So I looked around for a way to put this art on tour, and so during the next 4 years, I did my little dance in front of every corporate boardroom in America, flew out and went wherever they would have me, and I would lay out my whole plan, and they would, that sounds very good, and then the guy I was talking to would get transferred someplace else. Finally, the Target stores stepped up, and they identified a market that they wanted to reach. It was a growing market, and they wanted to reach it in the hippest possible way, and they sponsored the show. And they put in millions of dollars in the show. The show ran for 5 years. We did 15 museums across the country. In Indiana, we played here at the Indianapolis at the Indiana State Museum, where we set the attendance record. And we played at the Smithsonian, the Weissman, the DeYoung, Fort Lauderdale, National Hispanic Cultural Center, 15 venues and all. At each and every stop, we set an attendance record. So I knew that the art was good. Thank you very much. Thanks for the clap. When you have an attendance records for Latino art or Chicano art set in Indianapolis, I don't care if every Latino in the state and every one of their cousins from out of state came to see the show. It's not going to be that many people. So it was appealing to the broad base of people. It was appealing to the majority, appealing to people that love to see good art. At the St. Louis Science Center, which is our second biggest show, it was their second biggest show in their history after Titanic. So I knew I was hitting a chord, because in the end, this art was really good. These guys and women were really painting. They're real painters. And I'm glad that I could be able to bring this to you. So I would like to show you a few slides from the collection, from the show. It comes from a couple of different shows now. I've mounted a new show called Papel Chicano, which is works on paper. And it'll be going through smaller museums, and I'll just keep doing this for as long as I can. I'm going to take this art internationally so that the whole world can see these Chicanos who continue to paint in a wonderful manner. So we'd like to show the first slide now here. This is the first painting. It's the Mona Lisa of Chicano art. Notice the enigmatic smile on the face of the subject. This is a painting by Gaspar Enriquez, who we'll come to later. The first painting is called Show of Hands. It's by Mel Casas. He's from El Paso, Texas. And he was one of the very first early Chicano artists. He started in the late 60s, and this is from that period. And he was a pop artist. He came out of a pop tradition and then started melding it into Chicano art. And this painting characterizes a lot of things. Chicano art exists on a very sophisticated level and a very naive level simultaneously. All of these artists, for the most part, were university and or art school trained. So not only they had their whole Mexican roots to draw from, they had world art that they were accessing. And they referenced those paintings and that art tradition, all their paintings. As you can see by this painting, you have a show of hands, and it was during the protest period of Chicano art. You have a hand holding I even got a laser here. Watch this shit. You got a maraca here, a clenched fist, a OK sign, I guess, a figa, a peace sign, another one of those, a little rabbit over here, and you have Michelangelo's Creation of Man from the Sistine Chapel. These two paintings over here, but right in the middle where you have blatant subject and a subtlety in the middle, you have this big finger right in the middle here, rendered in silhouette. So you see it, but you don't see it, and it's the biggest thing in the whole painting. And this is called Show of Hands by Mel Casas. This next painting is by Carmen Lomas Garza. It's called Quinceañera. Quinceañera is the 15th birthday of girls who they're presented basically to society as their coming out party. And it's next to their wedding. It's the biggest ceremony they have in their life, and it's almost conducted like a wedding. There's almost like bridesmaids all dressed in the same dress. And so it starts with this agitprop folk art, which Chicano art was only characterized as, and started this tradition of this West Texas tradition where Carmen Lomas Garza grew up, and her paintings deal with the reminiscences of her growing up on the King Ranch in Kingsville in Texas, and it's just so typical of any Sunday you can cruise by a Mexican church, and there's people on there on the steps waiting to go in to have their quinceañera, to be welcomed into society. This is another of Carmen Lomas Garza's work. It's called Un Tarde. It's just a lazy afternoon in South Texas, and you can almost feel the hot summer breeze coming through there as the two lovers communicate with a screen in the middle, and the dueña over here watching over so nothing untoward happens. The pain in the ass little sister who has to stay in the room, the little kittens over here, and also over the bed, the traditional sepia photographs. Let me see, where is this thing? The sepia photographs, oh, there it is, of the mother and father over the bed, and also always the altar in the church. I mean, and the metal bedstead that's typical of that era and of that place. That's called Un Tarde. This is earache treatment. This is an old folk remedy where you have an earache, you roll up a newspaper and you light the end, and the smoke clears up the passage. And then a lot of guys that went into the army used that in Iran or Iraq. Anyways. This is a painting by Wayne Healy. Wayne Healy was the founder of the East Los Streetscapers, the biggest mural collective in East Los Angeles. We're responsible for the biggest murals in Los Angeles because that was part of the movement. The early part is they imitated the Mexican muralists, Orozco, Siqueiros, Rivera, in order to get the message out to the people who were basically illiterate. But this one's called Un Tarde en Meoque. An afternoon in Meoque, which is a town in Mexico that his wife comes from. And there you have the typical backyard scene. It's almost Norman Rockwell-ish in subject matter, but you can't see it really well in this picture. But what he does after he painted this picture, he stood over it with bottles of paint in like mustard bottles, those ketchup bottles, and squirt bottles, and he just stood on top of that and outlined everything in the painting with that. So it's almost like Jackson Pollock meets Norman Rockwell here in this outdoor backyard scene. And also one of the other things that characterizes Chicano art is what great draftsmen they are. The geometry of this painting, just the geometry of the painting, starting up in the corner there where these tamales are, and you just follow that line over there to the bottles and down to the kid, and you see the dogs underneath, and back up, you see the tortillas, the pot of food boiling, and the mother, and back up to get. So it allows you, your eye unconsciously, to keep traveling around the painting and see every aspect of the painting. A wonderful graphic symbol that Wayne put up there. This painting is called Beautiful Downtown Boyle Heights. Once again, you get the skewed perspective of that's Wayne up here on the scaffold painting, and he would be painting murals, and people from the neighborhood would come down and, hey, why aren't I in the painting? I'm living here. You know, this is my neighborhood. This would be this guy right here. And just the geometry, once again, coming down off this angle and making your eye go around, back up there and back up through this. Choom, choom, choom. And unconsciously, and just the color of these cars that are overlaid with these thick ropes of paint, it really shows you what a great painter he is, because that's a method where you can't go back. You know, you squirt that big thick of painting on a painting, and it's there. So the dexterity that requires you to do that is quite a lot. Here's another one by Wayne Healy. This is called Pregame Warmup, and it harkens back to a more innocent days where before, instead of drive-by shootings, they would have a football game to challenge. Belmont High School and Roosevelt High School were the two biggest public high schools in East Los Angeles, and they had a football game that drew 20,000 people. Every year was the biggest high school game in the United States, and it harkens back to more innocent days that they meet at the combination hamburger taco stand, the collision of Mexican-American, and challenge each other. Well, we'll see you on Saturday night. This one's called Pregame Warmup. This next picture is by a man named Cesar Martinez. He's from San Antonio, Texas, and he paints portraits. This Bato series. Bato means like a dude or a guy, and what's significant about his work is he takes people from his neighborhood and makes them worthy to be the subject of a painting, and very day-to-day, off-the-streets people. So it raises the perception of your place in society. You know, the thing about Chicano art being in all these museums right now is that for the first time, a lot of museums are talking to their Latino population in their cities, and therefore there's a dialogue going. Before, when you walk into a museum and there's no pictures of your people, no pictures of your culture, and no mention, they're not talking to you, so there's not any dialogue. So now we'll see in the future how dialogue is going to be very, very important to this country. This is called Bato with Sunglasses, and for obvious reasons. Here's a Bato and he's got sunglasses. This is another one, Sylvia with Chago's letter jacket. It encompasses not only that great backgrounds, which you'll see better in the next painting, but that it's almost kabuki-esque rendering of that figure. And it incorporates the chola makeup, you know, that is extreme, and the haircut. I mean, this could be any of the ukiyo-e prints of the Japanese period. This next one is called El hombre que les gustan las mujeres. The man who loves women. and he loves them in whatever apparition they come in, the Virgin, the whore, the Madonna. And you can see this guy in any Mexican restaurant or bar any time of day and night. He's been there all day. He should have been cutting lawns or whatever he was doing, but his truck broke down, you know, so... So he's in there. This is a guy that just grabs life with two hands, you know. Because the other great thing about you see in this painting is the tonal quality of it. It's addressing, it's referencing Mark Rothko with these two-toned combinations too. He uses, if you take it away, that's almost take away the figure, it's almost a Rothko painting. The way he uses those colors and those tones in there. So he was influenced by that when he was making these pictures. This next one is by Jesus Trevino. He was another one of the early ones, the photorealists out of San Antonio, Texas. And this one is called Los Pescadores, basically the cotton pickers. And it was commissioned by the little boy who was in this painting. And he wanted to have memories of he and his grandfather, who used to go out and take him out, and they used to pick cotton in West Texas. The up part of the story is this young man now is an older gentleman named Juan Vasquez, and he's now a federal judge. So a long way from the cotton fields. Huh? This next picture is by an artist named Magoo. His real name is Gilbert Lujan, but his nickname is Magoo because he said he always used to go up to paintings when he saw him and go up real close and look at him and then go back. And there was this character called Mr. Magoo that was nearsighted, and so they started calling him Mr. Magoo. All Chicanos have nicknames, usually 3 or 4. And this one's called Blue Dog and Peewee. But it really goes to the sense of humor that Chicanos have, where the dog or coyote figure is the trickster and is always there to tell you, hey, don't take life so seriously. So this is the Blue Dog and Peewee. This is another one by Magoo. And just the explosion on that shirt of this coyote, it's man and his best friend who is really putting him on. And these are pastel works, which we will say that the Chicanos are incredible pastel painters. I don't know, I think it comes out of a tradition of it's less expensive to use pastels than paint, because it's always a thing for painters to be able to afford canvas and paints. And so the Chicano artists first started accessing pastels and using them in a painterly quality. This is a painting by Roberto Gutierrez. He's a recently discovered, but ironically, one of the oldest Chicano painters in L.A. He worked for the post office all his life, and he used to work for Self-Help Graphics in East L.A., which was the seminal art institution there in East L.A., where all the Chicano artists of L.A. came together to formulate this idea of what was Chicano art. And the reason that it grew up in 2 spots primarily, San Antonio, Texas, and Los Angeles, is because they had these centers. In San Antonio, Texas, the Guadalupe Center. In Los Angeles, Self-Help Graphics, where these artists could come together and bang heads together and come up with this idea of what was and wasn't Chicano art and make it up. And Roberto, as one of the older kind of guys who had a job, he wasn't one of the young Turks, kept painting the neighborhood. And so he almost exclusively paints East LA. And this is a view from the roof of Self-Help Graphics. And anybody who's ever been to East LA instantly recognizes these pictures because they are so typical. It's almost like anybody that knows Impressionist art will instantly recognize Montmartre when they see it because they've seen it 1,000 times. This is another painting by Roberto Gutierrez. It's called Cinco Puntos. It's 5 points. And this really chronicles in the mid-'80s where the real big immigration wave of Mexicans started really coming to LA, even more so than before. Right now, we're involved in the biggest wave of immigration ever in the history of this country, right now. And primarily from Mexico. Has a lot of significant qualities to it. One of the things that makes this wave different from any other wave that went before it is now it's in every state. It is not confined to the West and Southwest. It's in every state. You have Latinos in every state, and their communities are growing. You have them in New Hampshire, and Mississippi, and Alabama, and Indiana, and Wisconsin, and everywhere there is in the United States. And this is a very kind of folk-esque picture of all these immigrants kind of transplanted Mexican culture into Los Angeles. It's called Cinco Puntos. Okay, go. There we go. Oh, that's a close-up. Let me back up. You can see a close-up of it. I just love the way he does the palm trees in back there. And it's like, this is watercolor, and I'm a poster paint almost. The next one, come on, don't be so fast. This is a park in East LA, Hollenbeck Park, which is one of the biggest parks in East LA. It's a sign of, well, there's a couple more paintings of that in the park. And he's going through a black and white period where these are all hand drawings that he does of various aspects of Hollenbeck Park. This is Roberto Gutierrez. This is a painting by Gaspar Enriquez. He's a photorealist, and does airbrush. And traditionally, airbrush artists have had the hardest time getting into the mainstream of being considered fine art because they were considered commercial art. And I was married to a painter for a long time, and she was an airbrush painter. And so what I realized at the end of the day that whether using airbrush or a brush or a pencil or a broom, it's just a stick. You know, it's what you do with the stick that makes the difference. So there is no difference. It's just an instrument that you use to make this art. And this one's called Ojos de Miel, Eyes of Honey, and it's a typical El Paso, Texas Chola girl from in high school. That typical baggy shirt, but the eyes are so attractive, and they just really bring you in. And this is a big acrylic on paper, Ojos de Miel. This is another Gaspar Enriquez painting. It's I Heart You. What it depicts is this young chola. Cholas are like gang members, kind of. Not necessarily gang members, but that's the way they dress, the baggy pants, the sag, you know the deal. And this is a girl that you might be afraid of if you saw her and a bunch of her girlfriends walking down the street. You might want to cross to the other side. But there is a jail in El Paso, Texas, where the inmates are on the fourth floor, and they communicate to their friends or relatives on the street by means of signs, because they can't hear each other. The distance is too great. And so they sign to the people up in the cells. And so some people are better at it than others, and they hire themselves out as interpreters. And so you have this painting is, for me, is the transformative power of love. You have this girl that you might be an angel signing up to one of the prisoners. I heart you. And it changes that girl's face for me from a chola to an angel. You know, man, you can't look at her face anymore without seeing the love and the beauty. This is Gaspar Enriquez. This is called Alone Together. It's by David Botello. He was one of the colorists of the East Los Streetscapers. He still works in close communication with Wayne Healy. And this is, once again, Hollenbeck Park, which was a central park in East LA. And this is very iridescent, this painting in real life. And I love the colors. It's at sunset, just about at sunset, and it really makes the waters glow. It's very kind of almost Tiffany-esque and impressionistic in its way. But you have these two aspects of the park. You have the where's the lady? The lady alone walking with her bags under the bridge, and then you have the two lovers here rendered in silhouette. This is called Alone Together. This is another painting by David Botello from Hollenbeck Park. It's called Wedding Pictures in Hollenbeck Park. Where traditionally, Mexican families used to take their pictures here because of the wonderful scenic beauty of the willow trees and the lake in back. But you have a lot of references here. You have also the dichotomy of being pastoral, which is their Mexican heritage, but at the same time being inner city, where you see the freeway going by in here and the car is rushing by. Also, it has an allusion, a classical allusion to Millet's The Angelus. This figure here, if you just had like a haystack right here, you would have Millet's The Angelus. This guy's a really good painter. He can really put it on very fast and knows what he's doing. But it really harkens back to that family. It's called Wedding Pictures in Hollenbeck Park by David Botello. Oops. So this one's called Drive-By Asesino. And it's a sinister painting by Adan Hernandez from San Antonio, Texas. Adan is the inventor of Chicano noir. All his paintings take place at night, and there's a lot of turmoil happening, a lot of alienation. There's wind going in his paintings all the time, so because that's what his feeling of being alienated, both from his community and his family and from the general populace. And you have this kind of almost classic Al Capone gangster firing out of the car, and you see the reflection. Oh, how do you do this? Hair trigger here. You see the reflection of the street here in the car with these palm trees bent over from the wind and the turmoil that is happening. This is called La Bomba, and these are the most cause and effect paintings I've ever seen. You have boom, the shoot, and then the explosion. And this is a very big painting. This is like 8 feet by 6 feet, and that's one thing Chicanos like to do. They like to paint big, which I like them, but they don't sell much of those. Nobody has that big a living room. But the great thing about this is how the ambiguity of what is happening here is like, did he cause this explosion, or did the explosion was caused by to him? And he is flying at you, this upside down akimbo figure that looks like what is that guy that doesn't? I'll think of his name in a minute. Same. He does those figures, but the ability of him to put on this paint, the paint on this painting is very thick, and it really resonates. There's almost a 3D quality to this painting. This is another Adan Hernandez painting. It's without title, but he used to live in this apartment up there, and he used to look down on the intersection and on the west side of San Antonio, which was the Chicano side of downtown San Antonio. There you go. You have all the landmarks of Adan's paintings, these palms that are always in motion, always some kind of irritant and turmoil. But looking down, there's fires happening. There's the isolation of this man right there in the corner, and the illumination that goes on, and somebody just watching TV, and life goes on, even though your heart is broken here. This is Adan Hernandez. And this is another Adan Hernandez, and I love this painting. It's called La Estrella que Cae, The Falling Stars. And this is a self-portrait of Adan. When he came back from New York, he had just made a bunch of paintings for Taylor Hackford and then for a movie, Blood In, Blood Out, and he was getting a lot of attention, and he thought he was just all that, you know. And he came back. He said he was came back to San Antonio. He was out in the woods one night, and he's, you know, you don't know what he's smoking. You know, there he could be smoking a cigarette or whatever. And he's got that big tattoo on his chest. He's wearing sunglasses at night, and over his shoulder, he looks up and he sees these falling stars. And it just kind of, it's a spiritual awakening for him. He kind of realizes his place in the universe. It's almost like St. Paul on the road to Damascus. There's an epiphany that happens here. And I love this painting. It's very personal. It's called La Estrella que Cae by Adan Hernandez. This is a painting by Chas Bojorquez. He's the tagger of the group, the graffiti artist, and graffiti artists always have a traditionally hard time getting into the mainstream because the street art is not considered fine art, but he's more famous in Japan than it is in the United States. And this one's called Chino Latino, and Chinese Latin, but it depicts a part in East LA that butts up against Chinatown, and it's where they meet. And so the gangs are fighting for territories, so they cover each other's placas or their their spray paintings with each other's signs, so they're overlaid. There's a lot of gang signs, there's a lot of Chicano signs, and there's a lot of traditional Chinese art. Chaz studied what is that called? I'm blanking on it. But he studied Japanese and Chinese art for many years, and he shows the result of that. It's called Chino Latino. Here's a painting by Chaz. It's called Words That Cut. And this is very iridescent, this painting. And it's these buzzwords that you can look at, and it evokes a different reaction in everybody that sees it. The actor Nicolas Cage owns this painting, and he graciously lent it to us for the tour. It's Words That Cut. It's almost like these words are chiseled in stone, and the exercise is to excise them from your emotional vocabulary. That's called Words That Cut. Okay. This is a painting by Eloy Torres. It's called A Woman, Red Floor. And it just shows the typical person from the neighborhood that he paints in that kind of classical portrait mode. He did a lot of murals. He still does a lot of murals in L.A. And this next painting is one of Eloy Torres' called Saving Angel. And it's a graphite on paper. Once again, it shows his pretty good graphic ability. He generally likes to paint other painters or other Chicano celebrities, and he's done a whole series of them. He works and lives in Los Angeles, Eloy Torres. This is almost an iconic Chicano painting. It's called La Pistola y el Corazón, The Heart and the Pistol. It was painted by George Yepes, who was a young gangbanger from, he had a million occupations, a gangbanger accountant. I don't know how you do that. And a boxer. So And he's a little fire plug of a guy, but he's just like, he's a true artist. He's just at it all the time. The original painting of this was the cover for the Los Lobos album of the same name, La Pistola y el Corazón. And the original painting was a painting only about that big, and it was owned by the actor Sean Penn, and it was burned up in a trailer fire. I don't know why his trailer burned up, but it did. And so it was lost to the ages. And when I started doing the show, I asked George, could you paint me another one of that image in the style that you're working on now? And so he does that. And this is the typical Day of the Dead pose with these two romantic figures rendered in calavera or skeleton pose. Here's another one of George Yepes's paintings, Axis Bold as Love. He named that painting that because that's what he was listening to as he was painting this painting. Very iridescent. It almost harkens back to Alphonse Mucha, the very kind of Madonna-esque painting. It's a huge painting. This painting is maybe 12 feet tall by 5.5 feet wide. It's a big painting, and to render that subtlety in that big a scale it's great. And even though the massiveness and the way he treats the skin here, I love the way he colors the skin here. But the delicacy of this lace across the bodice here, it's a wonderful little touch in this massive painting. It's very iridescent. Here's a painting by Gronk. Gronk was an artist that was part of the second Chicano collective called Asco. Asco means nausea, because they wanted to confront, it came out of the punk movement, and they wanted to confront their audience, because their audiences used to, especially the old people, say, estos pinturas me da asco, they make me nauseous. So they go, okay, well, that's who we are, we're the nauseous guys. And Gronk is really the doorway to Chicano abstraction. He works these symbols over and over again. He has this main symbol of this woman here in the thing, La Tormenta. La Tormenta is this very dramatic woman, almost Mexican soap opera, who looks out over the proceedings, and it almost is a representative of Gronk. And he keeps getting these symbols, and he keeps working these symbols in his background, and they want to burst through, but they're just part of the thing. And so he makes a leap into this next painting called La Perdida. And really, he has his roots in modern drawing, in Basquiat and Philip Guston, Miro. You can see a lot of the elements there of modern drawing. This is a drawing on handmade paper, and it's big. It's maybe 12, 13 feet long by 6 feet, maybe 6 feet high, and it's wonderful the way he balances the seemingly chaotic symbols and brings them into balance vis-a-vis the colors. He runs the red through absolutely at the right moment and runs the greens through to counter it exactly at the right moment. This is called La Perdida. It's by Gronk. Here's a pastel by Leo Limon. Leo Limon was one of the seminal Chicano painters in East LA, and he does a lot of Aztec symbols, Chicano symbols, world symbols, and in abstract form, and keeps rotating them. You see his use of the caracol up here, this green figure, which was the Aztec symbol for speech. He always uses this tic-tac-toe symbol for the game of life, and you see a big foot coming in here. Over here, right there is the Aztec ball game, and so this one's called Más Juegos, more games. And at the bottom over here, you see this kind of blue Vedic hand from Indian art. I still love this hand, and you have these symbols: the dollar, the hammer and sickle, and the anarchy sign. And below it, you have this nude figure laying back and smoking something. And imagining this whole thing. This is a pastel. The Chicanos are wonderful pastel artists. You'll see some more examples of that. This is another painting by Leo Limon. It's called Chico's heart. He was a big fan of Chico Mendes, who was the Brazilian environmentalist who was trying to save the rainforest. He was eventually killed by some people in Brazil who didn't want him to save the rainforest because they wanted more money. And he's escaping with the heart of the jungle in his little boat. I love this painting because I always show it in a really big representation because it's in fact a small painting. It's maybe about this big. When I was studying art when I was a kid, one of the artists that always took my breath away was Johannes Vermeer. And I would look at his paintings, and they were just such beautifully painted, intricate paintings of the bourgeois life of the Dutch and the Flemish in that period of time. And when I finally saw my first Vermeer in a museum, it was that big. I couldn't believe it. I was watching it, and I had seen it in these books, and I thought it was going to be this huge thing, and it was this little painting. So there's great power in little paintings. The detail has to be exact and correct, and I love the spontaneity of this painting and what it represents, the explosion and it's the escape of the heart of the jungle by Leo Limon. Here's another Leo Limon painting. It's called Cup of Choli, and it harkens back to his Aztec roots. This cup of chocolate here, or choli, was invented by the Aztecs, hot chocolate. So every time you drink hot chocolate, you get an Aztec on me. And this is a wonderful pastel painting. He works these symbols here just wonderfully in this medium. This is called Cup of Choli by Leo Limon. Okay, change. This is another Leo Limon pastel. It's called Temptation. And I love it. It's just he said it represented the first time he ever saw a woman naked. And he's a very shy guy. And the woman is very brazen. I love the horns up here. It's just like, that's cool. But the teeth are, it looks like Bart Simpson. Whenever Homer strangles him, you see tongue going like that. He was a forerunner of The Simpsons. This is called Temptation by Leo Limon. Here's a wonderful painting by Margaret Garcia. Margaret Garcia paints the people in her neighborhood in a lot of exotic poses. This one is called Janine at 39, Mother of Twins. And this is just the definition of fecundity. I mean, she's so ripe, and that rose and laying in this almost bed of thorns, and this big nopales cactus is above her head and around her, and then this big rich agave. The color in it is so dense and so blue. It's just amazing. And she just lays there with this serenity. It harkens back to Gauguin. It's almost like from Noah Noah, the series of paintings that Gauguin did in Tahiti. There's something very tropical and exotic about this painting. That's Margaret Garcia. Don't we have another Margaret? Change. There we go. This is Margaret's latest. It's called La Jarocha. La Jarocha is a typical folk dance that comes out of Veracruz in the Caribbean side of Mexico, and which women dance with candles on their head and the white face and masks. And this is once again a pastel painting, and it's large. It's 4 or 5 feet tall, and however many wide. And La Jarocha. And you notice the hallmark of these Chicano painters is that they move fast. They're very assured. They've been doing this for a long time. There's not a lot of studied little detail in it. They're emotional painters, and they have control over their brush. Okay, change, please. There we go. What do I do? Oh, this is the close-up of La Jarocha. And it's just, I love the spontaneity of this painting. It's just wonderful. Oops, okay. This is kind of Jesus Rangel. And he's a guy from Oxnard, California, which is like a little hick town outside of LA, but mostly Mexican. And this is the pastel he did for the Day of the Dead posters. And Mexicans and Chicanos have a different view of death than other cultures. They kind of view life, death as a part of life, and the continuity of that. And so their skeletons, and it's not something to scare you, it's something to to celebrate. Their Day of the Dead is a celebration of the dead and the living and the living and the dead, and the continuity of that. And I love this pastel he did for the poster. It's called Dia de los Muertos, the Day of the Dead. This is a painting by Marta Sanchez. It has a lot of things going on. Here's a modern retablo. A retablo is generally, classically, a painting painted on tin. This is a very big painting. It's 5 or 6 feet tall, and it's on tin. And retablos are thanks for prayers answered. And the thanks is painted out on a piece of tin, usually small, about that big, and it's left in some place or on a little altar on the side of the road, wherever the side of the occasion that started that prayer going. This is called La Danza, and she said it's the dance of her family's story to keep out of poverty. And it has a lot of things going in it. It has these writings, basically, if you snooze, you lose, was what it comes down to. And she has all these attachments here. This big square here is a big copper attachment there. And these little figures up here and over here are attached to the painting. They're 3D and they stand out. And you have a lot of things going on this painting. You have the modern interpretation of a retablo. You also have Cézanne's apples here. And you also have the Gustav Klimt figure coming down here, rendered in Chicano interpretation. I love this painting. It just keeps going on. It keeps rendering. That's what the hallmark of great painting. Every time you walk by it, it gives you something else. And that's why I always have to have paintings around me in my house. This is a painting by Raul Guerrero. He's from San Diego. And he did a series of paintings of Tijuana bars. Tijuana is the border town. I don't know if you know it or not, but it's really kind of the seedy interface between San Diego and Mexico. It's in Baja California, but if he was French, this would be the Moulin Rouge, and Mar, and he would be Toulouse-Lautrec instead of Raul Guerrero. But he is, and it takes place in these bar settings with a lot of topless bars, and the guy's late night feeling his oats and feeling the girl, and getting his pocket picked at the same time. This is once again in pastel. They're really nice pastel painters. Here's another, and this is a small pastel of the dancers in these nightclubs in Tijuana, and I just love the way that it's rendered, the pastels on top of each other, these whites over these greens, and it's just really, really free flowing. I love that, and just the way that these are rendered. Choo, choo, choo. Those girls. This is a painting called The Rest of the Paleteros by Frank Romero. Frank Romero was a part of a group called Los Four, and it was the original Chicano Collective. There were 4 painters, Frank Romero, Beto de la Rocha, Magoo, who you saw earlier with the dogs, and Carlos Almaraz, who you will see. And they were the first young Chicanos that got together and started formulating the theory of what Chicano art was and how they could create it and how they were being excluded from the mainstream. So what they did is they broke in to the Los Angeles County Museum of Art and set up their own display of Chicano art in the lobby. And it was guerrilla art, and so and they were the first ones that were awarded for their own show in the Los Angeles County Museum of Art, who had traditionally boycotted them. So they were the first guys who kind of formulated this whole theory. This one is called The Rest of the Paleteros. Paleteros are ice cream men, basically Mexican ice cream men. These guys down here. And the guy's running right with the balloons and the cotton candy. This takes place in MacArthur Park in Silver Lake, which is this lake in here. And it's a very dangerous place, especially at night. There's a lot of gang activity, there's a lot of prostitution, there's a lot of drug dealing in here, there's a lot of shootings, there's a lot of violence. And the LA SWAT team in all their fury comes down upon the ice cream men. These people over here handing up, they have popsicles in their hand over here, these dangerous weapons. But what it was really was the city fathers wanting to drive the last vestiges of Mexican culture out of this public place. And so they came down upon the ice cream and the rest of the paleteros. Once again, it feels this nice geometry that brings your eye around all the time. And these hash marks, if you really get, this is a big painting. This is a 10 by 12 feet, and it's a diptych. And you get up close to this and you see the confidence of Frank Romero. He's one of the oldest painters, and he just puts the paint on and doesn't fret about it, and he knows exactly what he's doing. It's kind of rendered so fast and so assuredly that the reflection of the skyline here in the lake is just done wonderfully. It's called Arresto de Paleteros. This one is called La Llorona. La Llorona is a Mexican myth of the weeping woman, a woman who had killed her children and now searches and roams the countryside looking for other children that she would put in a cage, and she's going to drown them too. She was almost rendered as a horsewoman a lot of times. It's a Mexican myth. And there you see the Picasso's influence here in this head. And this is Frank Romero, his version of La Llorona. The next painting you have is the younger version, the younger generation's version of a Mexican myth by Alex Rubio from San Antonio, and this is called La Lechuza, the owl woman. It's the almost same place as La Llorona, the weeping woman, comes out. And if you're out behind past the time that you're supposed to be home, La Lechuza is going to sweep down out of the trees and get you. And so Walt Disney said that there's only two emotions you can't fake: laughter and fear. Either you laugh and it's funny, or it's scary and you get afraid. This is a very scary painting. It scares a lot of the other painters in the show. These claws here are just in red gold, and the wings here and the feathers and the face of this woman is La Lechuza, and this moon. You have Van Gogh's moon here. The amazing part, and this is another big painting, that he did this with one little sable hair brush. One little brush, and it's like, shh, that's a lot of cups of coffee or whatever to do that, but it's an amazing painting. It's painted on wood. Here's another Alex Rubio painting. This is called The Backstabbers. And he deals in this fantastic card, the fantastic illumination, these kind of day glow colors. It says, the irony of the subject of the guy who was drawing money from the ATM machine and then being stabbed with a bottle by the guy that has a badge that says "Viva la Raza," long live the race, and these lines here that's typical of Alex Rubio. He's one of the younger guys from San Antonio. This is called The Backstabbers. I like this painting a lot. And here's another one of Alex Rubio's paintings done in black and white, and this is charcoal. The intensity and the detail in this painting is amazing. This is called Los Borrachos, the Drunks. And you can just see it in their eyes, and how he renders these bloodshot, whatever it is, eyes in there. And it's just you have to study his paintings for a long time. It's a lot of a Dutch influence there. He studied Dutch painters for a long time to get this kind of deal there. Change. Okay. This is a painting called Getting Them Out of the Car by John Valadez. He's one of the seminal painters of Chicano art. He's from Los Angeles. One of the big arguments when it first started the tour was who controlled the definition of Chicano. The 60s radical political guys wanted Chicano art just to be political, and the artists wanted to paint what they wanted to paint. And so we were doing a forum in San Antonio when we opened the show, and on the panel was myself and Cesar Martinez and John Valadez and somebody from the museum and this whole audience of people. And so the emotions got quite high among some of the people. And this one woman stood up and asked John Valadez, so he said, well, do you still consider yourself a Chicano painter? And he goes, only if it pisses you off. And that is the heart and soul of being a Chicano, the contrary stubbornness of it. I'm going to stand up for my rights and don't mess with me. This is a wonderful painting. It's a pastel, once again. This is John Valadez working in a photorealistic vein. In pastel, it deals with the aftermath of a drive-by shooting. You see the boy being shot here, and his soul starting to ascend out of the car, the pointing reminiscent of Martin Luther King's assassination, the arms pointing over there. Another one of the people that have been shot. Another one, the young boy laying across the chair, almost like a fish that these people are cutting out over here. And this is in Venice, California, and life goes on. People are walking up and down the boardwalk, and robberies are going on. And this is kind of like the everyday life of his neighborhood. This is John Valadez, and he's a wonderful painter. Here's another one of John's famous L.A. paintings called Pool Party. And it's typical Chicana. There's Rome fiddles while Nero fiddles while Rome burns. There's a big forest fire happening over the hills, and this girl's washing her pool, you know, and then washing the dog. It's almost the laissez-faire, so what attitude of these girls here. And it's I'm thinking of the other guy's name. There's another guy that in American pop that does kind of similar paintings. But John is a wonderful painter, and this is one of his only oils. He doesn't usually work in oil. He usually works in pastel, like this painting. This is a big pastel painting, and it's called Revelations. And he was working on a federal project in El Paso, Texas, in the federal building, doing a big mural in the federal building. And every day we look out the window and seeing these people coming over the border, and he said they were with nothing. They just had nothing with them, a bag with a grease spot in it. That's it. And it's almost like they kept coming out of this hole. So he wanted to depict these characters that were just down to their underwear. But he did them in the style of the graphic Mexican novels that are very sexy. You know, comic books in Mexico are very sexy. And so he had this very sexy woman out here, where they still bound by the Aztec traditions of these gods that are hanging around them. And then these roosters are just. We don't know where they came from, but they're just kind of part of the tradition. My big question was how we got Richard Pryor to pose for this. You know, I didn't know Richard Pryor was a Mexican, but, you know, there he is. Hey, Richard, what's up, you know? And this is John Valadez. It's a pastel. Wonderful painting. This is one called Little Girl with a Yellow Dress. And it's by Patsy Valdez. And Patsy is probably the foremost Chicana painter. She was part of that OSCO group, the Nausea group. This is the cover of the catalog for Chicano Visions, the show that went around the country for 5 years. And I just love this painting. Once again, you have the geometry of the painting, these skewed angles, the skewed angle of the sidewalk, and the painting that kind of sets you at odds with the kind of traditional backyard snapshot of this girl. It's in her Sunday best before going on to Mass. It's got little white gloves on, has a little tiny little purse, pink purse, and little pink socks in her Sunday best, and little barrettes in her hair. I love those little boom, boom, little barrettes. But if you look closely, you see that the angles of the painting are askew, and that you look at her feet, and the sidewalk is cracking. And her world is coming apart at this point. Her family is undergoing a breakup, and there was other factors that caused her severe dislocation at the time. And the ball comes in to play, but she can't play because she looks at now her little smile has turned into a grimace. This little girl's holding on for dear life. And Patsy's subsequent paintings to this takes place all in her room. And metaphorically, she got sent to her room emotionally, and her room is the picture of her emotional, spiritual state. It changes all the time. This is Patsy Valdez. And here's one of the pictures of her room when her earlier palette was very dark, very black and red, and there was a lot of turmoil in her life and her emotions and her spirituality, and she's just starting to come out of it. Now this is called Birthday Party, and you see the lovely flying tablecloth, and the moon is starting to come out, and you see the illumination, and somewhere in there, I can't remember where's her, I think. Up in the top is one of her. She always puts herself in a little picture that she overlooks the scene, almost as a detached person over this thing. I love the colors in this one. This is called Happy Birthday. This one's called Room on the Verge. And it's just, everything's flying in this thing, and she's in turmoil and emotional upset, but it displays her influences, and not only expressionist art and her Mexican heritage, but also Walt Disney. You look at these dancing brooms, and they're straight out of The Sorcerer's Apprentice, where Mickey Mouse is in the basement, and he takes the sorcerer's wand, and he turns these brooms animates these brooms. They carry pail upon pail of water down to the thing. That was one of the big influences in her life, and the circularity that it really kind of makes that room go round. The table's going round. The utensils are bent, and they're flying. Things are flying out of the drawer. And then there's her little portrait right up there in the corner where she's looking in on the whole scene. These jagged peaks here, with almost like in hell. And this is Room on the Verge, Patsy Valdez. Here's another Patsy Valdez one called Rainy Night. And I just love this, man. You have these, in the background, you have these dancing umbrellas going by, and the glow. She's very influenced by her Catholic upbringing, so a lot of her paintings have the glow of holy cards. I mean, that was one of the biggest influences in her life, this glow that comes off the lamp and juxtaposed with this hard, rainy image, and these curtains that magically, they kind of fly. They give it animation. This is Patsy Valdez. This is a painting by Carlos Almaraz. Carlos Almaraz is the only painter in the Chicano school that has passed on, and he was the first. And he was the most intelligent and well-read and educated of all the Chicano painters. He traveled to New York and he painted there and he studied there. He traveled to Paris. He traveled to China and studied all his traditions. And he is an explosion of color and lyric poetry. I mean, his paintings are so lyrical in the way they're set out and that palette that he uses. I have this painting now. It's a big painting. It's maybe 10 by 12, somewhere. I have this in my bedroom right now, and I get to look at this every day. And it's just like having the kids home from college after they've been away for 5 years. It's really a great thing. This one's called Early Californians, and you have the languidness of these brown figures, and that's very important. The brown figures are always in these Chicano paintings. They're interpreting their own lifestyle instead of having an interpretation thrust upon them, and that's very important for Chicano art. But I just love the way he uses this bridge, which exists in Echo Park, and these people in the boat. Little images. He keeps repeating the woman with the umbrella, and these little clown hats. He always envisions himself as the payaso, the clown, and every time you look at the painting, you see another image jumps out here. This face. And this painting keeps yielding. This is a Carlos Almaraz painting. It's called West Coast Crash. He gained notoriety in the art establishment by these series of car crash paintings, which was really a stand-in for this kind of urban angst, which was kind of the feeling that a lot of Mexicans and Chicanos were having. They came from a pastoral, a country environment, and they were jammed into inner city next to each other, and just the violence of the experience were manifested in these car crash paintings, and they're just almost like stop action figures, but rendered in really thick paint. You see in a detail up here how he could really put the paint on. This guy could really put it on, man. He's like the John Coltrane of painting. He wasn't counting anymore. He wasn't thinking of what colors he's going to put on next. He wasn't saying, well, this goes here. He's just like, it's automatic. And I've seen him work before. I've seen pictures or footage of him working, and it's fast. And just to render this smoke here, the way it is rendered here, it's really nice. It's flat, and these colors are very thick. This is a very thick painting coming off here, and he just renders it really wonderful. Here's another one called Sunset Crash. And this is a two-decker LA freeway. This is the freeway that leads from downtown LA into East LA. And in the early days when I was a kid, they didn't have any guardrails. And you could go over them. I saw many cars go over the rail and bam, crash onto the ones below. And it scared the hell out of me. Every time I had to go on the freeway, I would just make a sign of the cross and pray. And I don't want to go over the edge, you know. I saw one Mexican guy one time who was about to get on the freeway, and his car had been bent in half. He got hit on the passenger side. It was almost like an L going down the street. And as soon as he got on the freeway, he was going boom, 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 boom. That's a good Chicano. But it's the colors they use. They're very influenced by. I'm blanking on all these names. The guy that does the cakes, Tebow. Thank you very much. Wayne Tebow. It's almost the same palette as Wayne Tebow. He was very influential to Carlos at the same time, and he does these wonderful colors. In real life, these colors are they're subtle and vibrant at the same time. But he does these wonderful crashes. This is a painting by Vincent Valdez, and he's the youngest of all the Chicano painters. He comes from San Antonio, Texas. Graduated from the Rhode Island School of Design, RISD. He started at Yale, and he wasn't getting any support from the staff there because they wanted to change him to do kind of whatever contemporary art was at that point. And he really wanted to paint the images that were closest to him. And he found a couple of champions in his teachers at RISD, and he graduated from there. This is called Kill the Pachuco Bastards. And it depicts a real-life story in 1943 or 44, I believe, during the war. The mayor and the police chief of Los Angeles let these sailors rampage downtown East L.A. and attack all the zoot suiters. And they didn't like them because they were wearing these flamboyant zoot suit costumes, and they were Mexican in a time of this austerity during the war, and they just didn't like Mexicans anyways. And this painting depicts the real life story of these brutal encounters between the zoot suiters and the sailors over here. And this really happened. It was the inspiration for Zoot Suit, the play that brought Eddie Olmos to fame by Luis Valdez, and a lot of other things. When I put this painting up at the Smithsonian Institution, was one of our first venues in the tour, the curator came over to me and said, well, this is a kind of a graphic, violent painting, and we're going to have a lot of school kids in here. And my answer to her was, every major museum I've ever been in the world had some version of the rape of the Sabine women in their collection. And it just depends on whose ox is getting gored here. And she understood that, and she put the painting up, and it was one of the big hits. Technically, this is as a masterpiece. I mean, he gets all this action going in every single corner of this painting. There is something graphically displayed and well painted, and in the middle of it is this floating checkerboard. Just the ability to have this in the middle of your painting as a centerpiece and as the anchoring graphic element of your painting is just like, God, I know, it's like juggling cats and chainsaws, It is amazing the way he kept the perspective going in every single, the thing is back here and it all ties in and all makes sense. And that is the unifying element, this checkerboard, this red and white checkerboard. And this is a wonderful painting. I'm going to donate it somewhere sometime. And the last painting we come to is a painting by Vincent Valdez. This is called Death of Wino. And Wino was his grandfather's dog. That's his grandfather, the main figure in there. And his dog is Wino, who has died, and he's kind of his last close friend in the world. And you see this man who has devoted his life to work, just mourning the death of his dog. His doghouse has been boarded up because he's died. And you see Wino way up there in the heavens he's wearing. I'll show you a detail of it in a minute. And the color, the work up in red that he did, this is a gradation of red. The other thing that's remarkable about this painting is it's huge. It's almost 8 feet tall, and it's a pastel. These guys can do it, I mean, there's no BS about it. These guys can do it. Here's a detail of his dog. He's in heaven, and everybody wears robes in heaven. And he's got a little halo going there for him, man, little Wino the dog. And these explosions over here. And here's another detail of his grandfather's hands. This is amazing. This is a pastel. and he does it fast. This kid is really good. He just did a car for Ry Cooder of the story of the Chavez Ravine, where they dislocated all the Mexicans and built Dodger Stadium in L.A., and it was a big thing. But he really knows how to put the paint on, because these guys are technical and heartfelt and really indicative of a culture that's going to have a main influence in the United States culture in the next 20 years. There's going to be a culture. There's going to be a population explosion, basically Latino-based in every single state, and they're going to enter the mainstream at the same time, and they're going to be the biggest single unifying cultural, political, social force and workforce that we have in the United States. And the job here is to channel that and direct that force into good for the entire country. So now that's why this dialogue has started, so that when the institutions are talking to the people of their communities, then the dialogue has started, and they will engender a participation. That's what we want, is we want participation, not only entrance into the mainstream, because it's my theory that the Latino contribution to the culture of this country is not one of the side alleys that you whip out every Cinco de Mayo and have a beer and that's it. Latino contribution is one of the main threads of the cultural fabric of this country, and we could not exist without it, and is going to grow even stronger. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it. We're gonna take questions from anybody if they want, and there's people with microphones. Where they are? There they are. There they are, right there. Mm-hmm. And if you have a question, come up, raise your hand, and the young lady with the microphone will come over to you, and we'll answer any questions you want. Yes, sir.
This may be a little off the subject. Not too long ago, you had we all know you as your comedian from all times, for Latinos too. But when you did Latin Kings of Comedy, you got to meet George Lopez and Paul Rodriguez. Out of all those guys that you've met with, what do you say, which comedian gets you the best?
You know, they all give something different in their own particular way, whether it's Paul Rodriguez or George Lopez or Carlos Mencia coming up. I mentored every single one of those guys since they were very first comedian. I encouraged them. I put them on shows, and I traveled with them and encouraged them to be the comedians that they are. I think they all have their own perspective. And what I mainly gave to them is the idea that there is room for everybody. Because the Chicano mentality, the first was there were lobsters in a pot, you know. One lobster climbs out, the other lobster grabs him back and pulls him in, because if one makes it, then that means the rest of us won't. But I want to change that attitude so that there's room for everybody if you're good, and concentrate on you being good, and have something relevant to say, and have something, your own individual voice. If you have your individual voice, then you'll succeed, no matter who you are. Yes?
You have a question about regional variation. Do you notice that there's much of a difference between maybe the form of art, the topics, et cetera, from San Diego to LA to the Bay Area to Texas?
Yes. Texas is much more rural. I was very fortunate when I started collecting, and I was introduced to the painters from Texas, San Antonio, Texas, very early on in the deal. And there was that's why I really found out that there was this school of Chicano art happening, because the images and the subject matter was a lot alike. They were handled in a little bit different ways, but there was no communication between the two groups. They had never met each other and only basically heard about each other. Texas tends to be more rural and more country-oriented, where Los Angeles is very much more urban and expresses that tradition. San Diego is kind of a little bit of both. San Francisco tends to be very sophisticated, because they are a minority in San Francisco, even more so than in LA, where they're the majority. Yes. Somebody else? Go ahead. Yeah.
I was wondering if, I mean, one of the things that I think is probably for logistical reasons missing from this is sort of larger mural art. Obviously, you couldn't bring large murals into this exhibit. I was wondering if you could talk about the role that mural art, like in Chicano Park in San Diego and you know, under the bridges in LA and the Mission District in San Francisco and other places, plays in sort of the broad spectrum of Chicano art.
Sure. Chicano art started out of mural art. It was first characterized as agitprop folk art. It came out of a Mexican tradition from Siqueiros, Orozco, Rivera, who were the Tres Grandes mural painters of the Mexican Revolution. And that's their tradition. They continued on in all those various neighborhoods to bring the news to the people. First, it was in Mexico because there was an illiterate population, and that's the way they could communicate these social ideas to the people through these murals. Murals are still being painted throughout LA and on all those neighborhoods, San Diego, and they're the prides of the community. Why I have not included any in this collection is because I wanted to take the Chicano art from its inception and start it to where these painters were into the fine arts period, because they were being shut out of that part of the museum. They weren't getting representation in there, and they were being just categorized as folk artists. And as you can see, they're fine artists. Mural tradition is very important, and especially in neighborhoods, and it continues on. And they depict scenes that happen in their neighborhood, and so they're generally very specific to the locales from which they come, and they're very powerful that way. And it gives the start for many artists. They all worked on mural projects, especially Wayne Healy and the East Los Streetscapers. Now they've taken that mural tradition out to other cities that are not traditionally thought of as Chicano or Mexican. Anybody? Where you are? Oh, right here.
Oh, the question is, you went through a lot of information, and is there a place on the internet or something like that where we can look and learn more? There is.
I have a link on my own website, is CheechMarinOnline.com, which you can link to the painting show, and there's also Chicano-art-life.com. Just access it and you find where the show was and has been, will be. And you can get a lot of information. There's also books for sale. The Chicano Visions book, published by Little Brown, it's been a big seller, and the new Papel Chicano book, which we're self-publishing. It turns out it's doing very well. They both can be purchased here, I think, and you can get them in any fine bookstore. Thank you. Yes.
Hi, I work for Northside High School, and I work with the ESL program, and a lot of my students, they're Mexicans, and they've been drawing pictures and stuff, and I'm really impressed in seeing your presentation, and I wanted to guide them to show them that there are places that they could probably display their art too, and I was, wondering where could we do something like that here in Indiana?
Where would you do that? Somewhere? Start in the schools and organize. The quintessential aspect that has to take place in each of the communities is there has to be a center where these kids can come together to formulate the idea of what their version of Chicano is, or just to make art.
But they're not in art classes. They're just doing this on their own time, and I've seen some of their work, and I think it's beautiful, and just seeing your display,
Get them organized into classes. Have them come together. There's more power together. Each of these artists here has a power of their own, but nothing like being banded together in a school. Some resist it, some embrace it. But there's more power. A rising tide raises all ships, and that's what I'm trying to do. You have the other side of the coin where the second largest concentration of Mexicans in the United States is in Chicago. Outside of Los Angeles is Chicago, and they have not established a Chicano identity because they have, for a number of various reasons, there's no welcoming atmosphere, there's no general populace that they can blend in with. They're not going to blend in with the Polish and the Germans and the Irish and the Italian immigrants there, and so they've become very insular and kept to their traditional Mexican roots, and so the young artists that come up in that kind of milieu, tend to, if they want to be painters, they're influenced by being Chicago painters. So they kind of get co-opted by the mainstream instead of establishing or inventing a Chicano dialogue or Chicano identity. And that Chicano identity is going to be different now in every community that it exists. A Chicano in Mississippi is going to be different from the Chicano in San Diego. And one in New Hampshire is going to be different in both of those. But they're all going to have something in common, something interpretation. How that thing mixes together, how traditional Mexican mixes with American pop is what Chicano is, and how that metamorphosis takes place, and what it spews forth from that is something new. We're giving birth to something new. So gather them together, put them in together. There's more power than together, and they can influence each other. They say, oh, that guy draws better. I better draw better than that. And that's what these guys did. Anyone?
Do you absolutely have a favorite Chicano artist? I know you've talked a lot about all of them, and they're wonderful, but do you absolutely have one favorite artist?
I do, but I won't mention his name. Although it is Carlos Alvarez. You know, it's like choosing among your children, you know. What's your favorite child? You're going to piss somebody off in the process, you know, and make them feel bad. And artists are very touchy anyways. I love Carlos Alvarez just because I just think he's just the most lyrical of the painters. But I love each of the painters for some aspect more than, you know, that it has a distinctive aspect of him. But the great joy for me is being able to view all this art, and I couldn't do it because I had so much art that I couldn't put it all in my house, and they're big paintings, and so I put it on tour. And so every 3 or 4 months during the last 5 years, I got to go to another city and see it displayed in another museum, and it was just like great. It's like one of my kids went out to another city and got a job, you know, and he got a really good job, and so you know, I don't really choose among them because I have to work with them, you know, and. But Carlos, you can say Carlos Alvarez is my favorite because, and it won't piss anybody off because he's dead, so, so I like him. Anybody else? Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. You can shout it out. I can hear you. Oh, which way? She's down here. There we go.
I was wondering if you thought that as generations goes on and the Chicanos become more Americanos, part of the Chicano part, will we see a reinterpretation of the themes that you're working on? In other words, do you think they're going to become more American folkloric, if you want to use those themes? Well, that's happening now. With the generation of young Chicanos in their 20s and in their teens and 20s that are coming in early or 30s. Because they are, as they become more mainstream, they are influenced by mainstream influences. And for young artists right now, that means digital. So the allegiance now is to technique rather than identity. But they want to include identity. I've seen that they want to include identity, but they don't know kind of how to do it yet, the young guys. But some of them are. And I think the crux of the matter is some of them are going to have to either go digital and give up handcrafted, or stay in handcrafted. Because when we first started this whole journey, you could be. I wanted to create a Chicano school of art so Chicanos could have some place where they can identify with and create art in that manner. But then you get it to the point where you can be just a Chicano who paints Chicano school or Chicano who paints. You can paint like Mondrian or Picasso or Miro or anybody or make contemporary. You could be a conceptual artist or any of those things. This school is a painting school. It's a graphic. But I see them working it out. I see them working it out because they want to make that identification. And the more they're influenced by having their culture be part of the mainstream. You know, when we're in the situation now where salsa is the #1 condiment over ketchup. It's true right now. So the change has already happened. We're just getting used to the fact. That's what the process we're in right now. So as they realize that you know, and say, well, I don't know if I'm a Chicano, or remember, I have to say adios to my, I'm speaking Spanish already, And so that's kind of the process of it. So they'll figure it out.
My question has to do with women in art, and there is a very heavy influence of
Where are you? Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
There's a heavy influence of male art in your collection, and I would ask, who are the upcoming young women, older women, and would you put together a collection of Latinas in art?
Yes, actually, I'm putting that show together right now. It's a collection of all Chicana artists. It's called Get Off My Damn Back. There's some great Chicana artists. Patsy Valdez, Carmen Lomas Garza, Marco Garcia. There's some the young ones coming up are really good. They had to fight the battle of the sexes on their own terms before I ever got into there. But there's as many women doing well in the field of art as there is now. But they have a definite perspective on it. There's another painter, Diane Gamboa, who I didn't include tonight's show because he's been pissing me off lately, and I have the clicker, and you don't. But I wanted to put a show definitely together of all women and give them encouragement. That's what we need. The whole basis of this Chicano popularization of this is to give us shelf space. That's the if you're not on the shelf, you don't exist. If you're not in the walls of the museum, you don't exist. If you're not on TV, so it's always to get shelf space, and that's what the whole. And thank God for corporate America. That's one thing I had to fight with the Chicano old line radical establishment. We don't have the corporation America co-opting our thing. Corporate America is bringing your art to the people where nobody would do it before. They're not saying that, although everybody has to shop at Target now, all Chicanos, but hey, it's a good deal. They got good stuff for cheap prices, so we all win. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. I'll be out signing books if you want to come back. Thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it. Long live Indiana.